What's up? What's up? All right, take Casey back here again. Let's wrap up the offseason. We'll talk about some transactions that happened yesterday. I got back from dinner. I am 2 wines deep, so this will be an interesting ride, but we will see how it goes here. So, what teams do we got left? First up, let's look at Philly. I should have split screened this. Oh well, we'll do it live here. We might have talked about Philly already. So they're still hampered by the two $50 million contracts. You got Joel Embiid, Paul George, both good when healthy. Diminishing returns on both though, and that's taking up. First apron is at $209 million. Embiid and Paul George combined is $101 million, so you're already about halfway there just with those two players, and they're not even your best player, which is Tyrese Maxey's at $40 million. Edgecombe was your first-round pick last year, who was pretty good, but because those four salaries, even Edgecombe being the third overall pick, being in an 8-digit salary, means the rest of your roster's got to be pretty cheap here. So you see everyone else after Edgecombe, Barlow, Watford, so on, all $3.5 million and under. Quentin Grimes, Kelly Oubre, and Andre Drummond are all free agents for you. You have their cap hit. You have Grimes bird rights, I believe. I'm not sure if you have Oubre's. Drummond's, I know you don't, because he's just been signing one-year contracts every year. You have the 22nd overall pick, which they just took off the board here a couple of minutes ago, but I don't remember who they took, and I'm not going to be able to provide any analysis on rookies. So you're $18 million under the tax. They traded Jared McCain to duck the tax, so you would think they probably want to stay around this tax line, so they'll be able to duck the tax again. They're at 11 players, 12 with the 22nd overall pick, which is about $3.6 million. So you're playing with about $15 million in space. That means you could probably bring back Drummond. You could probably bring back one of Oubre or Grimes, but not both if you're trying to avoid the tax. So let's say you bring back Drummond and Oubre and field that 22nd overall pick. That gets you to 14 players. And you would probably be tax compliant at that point. The other thing you can obviously do is at the deadline you could trade one of these guys, let's say Dalton Terry, at the trade deadline, and then replace him with a minimum prorated contract, which would be about half the salary. So if you're $1 million or so over, you can navigate the salary, the luxury tax that way. In terms of trades for Philly, that's kind of hard to piece together, because Embiid, I think, has 3 years after this. Paul George has 2 years after this. We can pull up the trade machine just to confirm that. And we'll look at like Memphis, because Memphis has a big trade exception. They're in asset accumulation here. I saw they traded down from 16 to 21 and picked up 5 second-rounders to do so they would love to accumulate assets. That's kind of the point in this season, or the point in their roster building that they're at here. Acquiring Paul George would be tricky if John Morant's not in the trade, so let's see if we can even piece this together. So I don't think they could actually trade Brandon Clark's contract, which means you have to start combining stuff like Ty Jerome and Taylor Hendricks, and we're still not there, which means you have to combine minimum, so which would mean it would have to be a John Morant trade. So I think we might have discussed this trade in previous videos. I saw this trade in a different YouTube video, but Paul George to Memphis, John Morant to Sacramento, and Zach LaVine to Philly would save Philly about 5.2. Okay, Memphis would have to include a minimum contract in this. So since Memphis is getting assets, let's put Oliver Prosper here to Philly. So then Philly's only saving 2.7, but they're getting out of the additional year next year of Paul George. The Kings are taking on an extra year of John Morant to get off Zach LaVine, but Philly acquires Zach LaVine, who's not a perfect fit on this roster because you already have two guards, so that's not the most ideal scenario. But you get out of the Paul George contract, then it just becomes, what are you paying to get out of that contract? You have a pretty decent collection here of second-round picks. So if you sent Memphis 4 or 5 of those, maybe you get out of Paul George. But if we're not doing something like that, what else could Paul George potentially go for here? Just getting in the league real quick here. It's not an easy trade to come up with because the salary is already so high. Could you deal like Milwaukee? Since Milwaukee is committed to rebuilding here, could you do like Miles Turner and Kuzma for Joel Embiid? So the Bucks would take on $10 million there, but they shed salary in the Giannis trade. Let's throw Miami on there just to piece this together. We can talk about the Giannis trade while we do this here too. So the Giannis trade, I do believe, is the best Milwaukee could do for Giannis. It seems light in actual compensation because they only got, I believe, they can't trade that one. Can they trade this one? They only got 2 unprotected first along with a 13th overall pick. Philly needs to send something to Miami. Might send something to Philly. All right, so let's do there. That's a shitty one. We'll send that to Miami just to see this completed. So Milwaukee got Tyler Hero, who they can probably flip. I don't think they could get a first for him, but they could get a couple seconds for him. I have to scroll this over here so you can actually see the trade on one screen, so I have to kind of bounce between my windows here. So apologies if I'm not getting all of those in every time here. So the actual Giannis trade was Giannis, and I forgot to include Bobby Portis into the trade exception. Giannis and Bobby Portis to Miami for Tyler Hero, Jaquez, Khalil Ware, Jakachunas, the 13th overall pick, and 2 future firsts. And I think they got a pick swap in there too. These might not be the exact first that they got. So if you kind of analyze where the league has been the last 6-12 months, we saw Trae Young traded for no first-round picks. He was traded for CJ McCollum's expiring contract, which ended up being pretty nice for Atlanta, and Cody Kespert's negative contract. I thought Cody Kesper would be kind of more of a neutral asset, but he wasn't in the playoff rotation. I think he's got 2 years left on his contract at $13 million, which if he can't play in the playoffs, that's just a negative contract, being $13 million a year. So Atlanta had to take back a bad contract, just not as bad as Trae's as they perceived, and they did get a serviceable player that could be 80-90% of Trae Young and CJ McCollum. And then the Wizards also made a second trade for Anthony Davis, where essentially they did the same thing. They gave up a teeny bit more because I think they did give up a guy or two on their rookie scale contracts. They had to take back the D'Angelo Russell contract with Anthony Davis, and they had to give 2 quote-unquote first-round picks up. One which was the 30th overall pick in the draft, which Dallas hasn't even been able to select yet because the draft takes 4 or 5 hours, and they have the very last pick. And then they got a fake first-round pick that is a 2030 Golden State pick that is protected, I believe, 1 through 20. And if it falls in that pick range, it becomes nothing. So it's really just a first-round pick in name alone to make it look like they got 3 first-rounders for Luka instead of 1. So when you figure in those contacts, the outlier here is the Memphis Grizzlies did get 3 first-round picks for Jaren Jackson. Jaren Jackson is younger. He doesn't necessarily have a healthier track record than Anthony Davis. But he is younger, but I did think Memphis kind of pulled a fast one on Utah there and got extra value because they got 3 fairly valuable first-round picks. But Triple J, I think, was in the first year of his extension. It may not have even kicked in. So part of what Utah paid for was having a full 4 or 5 years of Jaren Jackson that they got in that trade. So when you factor in that Giannis has to sign his extension, it's probably going to start in like the $60 million range, which is just hard to stomach for any contending team. And then you figure in Miami's package where you get 3 youngish players. You got 3 guys on their rookie scale contracts, even though Hawkes is in the last year of his deal. And you get 3 first-round picks. And on top of that, plus a swap, Tyler Hero was also a first-round pick from Miami a few years back. So you're talking about Miami gave up like 7 first-round picks in players and picks. Just in the modern scale of trades, it's more player-oriented than pick-oriented. So half those draft assets were already players in the league. None of which of the 4 you feel like can really be a superstar the way Giannis is, but they're all serviceable players in a level. And then every other Giannis package I just didn't think was very realistic. Even the Boston one, which was essentially Jaylen Brown straight up. You're doing a lateral move at best, and you're not really preparing for the future. The other thing is with the lottery reform, I don't think there was a whole lot of value in the Bucks getting their pick back because there's no guarantee that the Bucks picks would be top picks, even though the Bucks will be a bottom 5 team in the league. So I think this was the smartest path forward of just going full rebuild, plan to not contend for the next 4 or 5 years and try to set your runway up that way. And you can kind of reevaluate where you're at, asset accumulate, and then when the lottery reform happens again 3 years from now, that's your kind of prime window to strike. So going back to these hypothetical trades here, in this scenario, Philly is going to swap Joel Embiid's contract, which is essentially 3 years. That's a little over $180 million, which is an insane contract, to the Bucks. They get Miles Turner and Kuzma's expiring back here, and so Philly would have to throw in at least a first here. So let's say they give up this Clippers pick to get off that Embiid contract. You are helping Philly get off the Miles Turner contract, which is maybe neutral at best. It's probably a slight overpay for Miles Turner, but it's not nearly as egregious as Embiid. But the other upside of the Milwaukee Bucks, who don't control their picks, is now you have a core that you can at least put on like your posters and try to be the 10 seed with Embiid and Hero, along with Ware, Hawkes, and Jakob Chunas. So Khalil Ware is your backup center in this scenario, but because Embiid's going to miss at least half the season, he's kind of like your 1B starting center. And I think this could make sense for Milwaukee. You could probably try to squeeze more assets out of Philly. I'm not sure how much more willing they would want to go, but Philly is getting off those extra 2 years in Embiid plus clearing $11 million, which would allow them to probably keep all 3 of Grimes, Oubre, and Drummond. You have less of a need for Drummond with Turner because Turner's healthy and more reliable than Drummond. So maybe you could let Drummond walk and just bring back Grimes and Oubre in that sense. And then you kind of also have an incumbent Oubre replacement in Kuzma. So you would have a lot more flexibility in this. It would cost you a first-round pick, but it allows you to reset your timeline more around Maxey and Edgecombe. But outside of trading Embiid or Paul George, I don't think there's anything real sizable that Philly could do. So let's see. So we're at Philly. So then we move on to Golden State next. The Warriors are just kind of stuck in this no man's land here where they're trying to do something in the last years of Steph Curry. Steph Curry's going to be in his age 38, potentially aging into 39 this season. All right, I will resume this video later. So we'll do a part 2 of wine and steak later.